Kia ora and welcome to the webinar Sexual Violence and Colonisation with Whaea Hera Pierce. Just a couple of housekeeping things with everyone. If you'd like, we will be doing a 40-minute presentation, and then at the end we've set aside 20 minutes for questions. So that is when everyone can ask their questions. And if you just ask your questions, please, in the Q&A box, and then you can chat to everybody else in the webinar chat. Thank you.
Mō ringa koutou. Oh. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko tēnei te mihi miharo kia koutou, noho maha kei roto tō kāinga. Ko tēnei te mihi nui kia o koutou waka, o koutou maunga, o koutou marae, noho ana kei roto Aotearoa. Tēnei te mihi nui kia koutou, nau mai hara mai, i runga te karanga o nā hene. Hene ahu one, hene tītama, hene nui te pō. Ko tēnei te mihi miharo kia koutou. Koutou noho ana kei roto tō kāinga, maha, i wainga nui a Aotearoa, nā māwiwitanga, nā maha o te kāwanatanga a Jacinda Ardern, ona karanga kia mātou, noho tū, kei roto tā mātou kāinga, tēnei te mihi nui kia koutou e mahi ana, tēnei mahi nunui. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Te mea tuatahi e karakia. Te ngua tamātu tamai ti wai rua tapu a menei. Awa meri e ki ana koe te kiritia kia koe tāri koe whakapainga nā wahine, aka whakapainga te hoa tō kupu. E hata Māori i te mātou wahine o te atua, i noi koe mō mātou mo te ungahara, a te aro tō mātou matinga rawa a menei. My reason for doing that karakia is that I have a very strong passion for wharitangata. And I really love that karakia because it resonates with my passion. And just for those that may not know it, it's a karakia about a wharitangata, about a woman's womb. However, 2,000 years ago, she was chosen for a specific reason. And that simply was to carry and give birth to our Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, now, where am I, whānau? Kororo ko waia, taku pepeha. Ko Haria homa. Ko mamari, mātātua, horauta, nā waka. Taratara, tarakeha, hikurangi, haumea, nā maunga. Nā te kahu ki whangaroa, whakatohia, Ngāti Parau, me te aitanga mahaki, nā iwi, kahukura ariki, ōpapi, waiapu, hini waiapu, takitimu me tō mairangi, nā marae. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Okay, my kōrero is about colonization and sexual abuse. I'm going to share my ideas of colonization and how that has affected. I'm in my 72nd year. So all of that time, I'm going to share my life story, and we'll touch on what this kaupapa is all about, which is colonisation and sexual abuse. Okay, I was born 1949 in a beautiful little place called Uawa, ki Moana Nui a Kiwa, ki Te Tai Rāwhiti. During that time, my mother and father lived in Uawa, and when I think back to those days of being in Uawa, it's at this time that I have to give a maumahara to my loved ones in my family who are no longer with us. And they are, I had a tuakana ko Rewata. He was born in 1944. He died of pneumonia. And that was a flu epidemic that hit the East Coast very badly in the 1940s, and I believe it was there before my date too, in the 30s. And then I had my next door kana who lived until September 2017. He died then, 2017. So that's just a couple of years ago. I had a sister. She was born 1948, which was, she was born the 24th of April, 1948. So it's about 10 months before I was born. I was born 15th of February, 1949. But my sister, Rose to Media, she also died of pneumonia. Influenza, those bad flus that was hitting the East Coast. So my mother was only a young mother then, and Dad was a young man. He married my mother a day before he was 21, on the 26th of October 1940. If my memory serves me right, I think 43. Anyway, living in Uawa, my name was Hera Hera Pierce. I had a nickname given to me by the old people, which was called Kui. I was known as Kuia. And the interesting thing about that nickname is that it was a name that has stuck with me within my family, and especially with my brothers. They still do call me Kuia today, or Kui. But what's interesting about that is that, just getting back to finish my maumahara, I also had a brother, Tamatiwiki, John. He was born on the 15th of February, 1952. He also died of pneumonia, influenza. They were only babies. And then I had a young sister. She, well, my mum wasn't carrying her along. That was the 13th of the 10th, 1952. So you can see that two babies in the same year died. But my sister, Hearia Oni, she was, mum only carried her for about 5 months. So in Uawa, I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers buried. During those times, I remember not being a well person. I remember that I was born with eczema and asthma, and I was covered from head to toe. And I remember steaming pots around me. And I remember my hands and feet being tied up simply because I would scratch myself raw. And I remember my nanny, my father's mother, being around, and my mother being around, and all of those people that looked after me during that time. I remember being taken to the sea and bathed in the seawater. So consequently, I didn't go to school or anything when I lived in Uawa. But during those times, I can remember that at our home, we had the mass, hahi katorika we were, and Pa would come to our home. He lived at Tokomoro during those days, and would come there, and we would have Māori Mass at my grandparents' home in Tolaga Bay, Uawa. What else can I talk about? 1956, interesting year. 1955, 56, I was 6, 7. We moved, we left the East Coast. Now this was huge. And the trauma that I know it would have caused, especially for my mother. We left the East Coast and we moved to the bottom of the Te Waiponamu, to a beautiful place called the Catlins. And so we moved from Uawa, Tolaga Bay. We actually moved from Hikurangi. During that time, we were living on Hikurangi in what we call a sledge hut. Now, my dad was a native bushworker, and he pulled that sledge hut around Hikurangi, and we lived in it. And we were always beside a creek. Beautiful. I remember that creek, crystal clear, coming down Hikurangi. And but that was our life. And I remember such things as pigs hanging from the tree, and puha and watercress and all of those things, and apples, the beautiful apples on Hikurangi. This is what I remember. But anyway, after all of those good times and being a sickly child, we were upheavaled and left. We left whānau, we left hapu, we left iwi. And we moved from Uawa all the way to the Te Waiponamu, right down to the bottom, to a little place called Tahakopa in the Catlins. Now, during that time, the trauma that I know both of my parents would have felt, because they were leaving their loved ones. They were leaving their babies that were buried at Ahawati and at the Māori Urupa in Uawa, leaving their parents, and it would have been huge. So when I think back to those days and I think of what life was like hard, but it was also very good too. I never started school until I got to the Waiponamu, and this is where things kind of changed for me. I would have been a little 6-year-old, and I can remember holding my father's hands, and he took me to school. And I was introduced to the principal, Mrs. Hall, I remember, a beautiful lady, and Dad was telling her my name, Heraira Mariana Henry. Mr. Henry, how are we going to say your daughter's name? And my father replied along something like, her name means princess. And it somehow went like this. The principal's wife said, "Oh, Mr. Henry, that's easy. In English, it's Sarah." But my dad had said that, that because I was named after a nanny back home, which was my mother's mother who brought her up. Sarah, so she said, "Oh, Mr. Henry, can we call her Sarah?" We could manage that a lot better. So from the age of 6, 7, my name became Sarah, and still is Sarah to this day in my family, in the whole of South Otago, and everybody that knows me. I never took back my name Heraira or Hera until I got married, and I was 32 years old. And I was filling out the papers to get, marriage papers and all of that, having a talk with my mum, and she pointed out to me that Sarah was not really my name. And I thought, oh, okay. And so the story came out. My point of bringing all of this up is that, again, it was put on me that the English name was easier for the community to handle. I was so affronted about that. And now that I'm in my 71st year and I think back, I was thinking, oh my God, how dare they? So when I talk about my family, my brother still used the nickname Kui or Queer when we talk over the phone and that, or when we meet, which is not often because they are all in Australia. They still do call me Queer or Sarah, but they don't say Hera. So my reasoning for bringing that up is that colonization exists within my family, and through no fault of theirs, no fault of mine, and definitely no fault of my parents. It was about being accepted. It was about getting on with living. It was about got a life to live. We haven't got time to worry about the small stuff. When you think about it, it was really the big stuff. At the age of 10, I was at, I have photos of me at Tahakupa School, 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old. And then I had a good life in the Catlins. Good life as in my mum was at that time. By the way, I'm a sibling of 15. Okay, 9 of us are still above the ground. So did I have a lot of babies coming into my life? Yes. Were they a big part of my life during my early years of being a child? Yes, and I loved it. Such things as looking after the babies. I didn't have to peel potatoes. I didn't have to go out into the garden, to dig up the potatoes. So having a baby and looking after them, because back in those days you made bottles of milk and you used Carolac, and you had to boil the milk, but not let it boil, just bring it so that it had a slight skim on top and lift it off. Collecting puha. My father and brothers, by crikey, there was no pack and save and countdown in those days. It was all about sacks of crayfish, heaps of boo-boos, endless bags of blue cod, and pigeon. We were brought up on pigeons. Now, what I remember about the pigeons is that Dad would bring home these pigeons. We'd be in the lounge plucking these pigeons, and there's a big open fire going, and oh my gosh, what do we have to do? Burn all those feathers. And I couldn't understand that because they were beautiful. But we had to do that because if the ranger caught you, Dad would be arrested. Well, that never happened anyway. But did we eat pigeons? Yes. Well, was I brought up on pigeons? Yes. Would I like to eat a pigeon today from the bush, from the wild bush? Yes, I would. And I can tell you the only thing that wasn't eaten was the beak and the legs. Everything else we ate and we enjoyed. So my time in the Tahakupa and my time on Hikurangi was eating from the land, eating from the sea, eating from the bush. We had things like cabin bread, tins of it. We had things like Bornvita and powder milk, tins of it. We didn't have little bags of flour. We had sacks of flour, sacks of sugar. But they were good days, good life. We ate and lived just like how whānau hapu and iwi did in those days. Things changed for me. I was 14 years old, and next minute we're leaving the bush. I love the bush. I was brought up in the bush for 14 years of my life, in Hikurangi and Uaua and Tolaga Bay and down in the Catlins. But at the age of 15, we moved again. And this time we left little Tahakupa and went to a place called Portunoa, commonly known as Clinton. Okay, so that year, I think I was 14 years old. I think the year was 1963, I think it was. And we moved to Clinton. Wow. Things changed there too. I was only at the Clinton school because I was 14. I never started school till I was 7. So at the age of 14, finished school. The following year, on 15th of February, I was 15, straight to work. No high school for me, no more education. When I think back to my primary school days, I can remember one year of just going to school for 52 days in one whole year. And the reason being is that I was sick with asthma and eczema. Spent a lot of time in the Whaea hospital. So that's what I remember about my early days down in the Catlins. Moved to Clinton. Well, that was a change and a half. I began mahi in the Clinton railway station, Clinton refreshment rooms, and I was only 15. I had to handle money. I didn't even know how to do money. And I can remember a lovely lady who still lives in Clinton today taught me how to give change for a £10 note, a £5 note, and you had to count. It was pounds, shillings and pence. And people would come in off the train and get what they wanted to eat. So what was poignant about that time for me, you know, they talk about, up until then, I had just lived a pretty normal life and made do with what we had around us. Well, I can tell you, things changed for me then. I had money. Oh, then I had high heel shoes. Then I had makeup. Then I had stockings with lines up the back. I was wearing suspender belts. Hadn't even heard about them before. I was wearing such things as corsets. And I'm thinking, oh, well, but I loved it. I had bags, a big black vinyl bag full of makeup. So began my life as going to hairdressers, wearing big flash hairdos, wearing beautiful clothes, going to balls. Did I assimilate into that way of life? Yes, I did. Did it become the norm for me? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Because we had moved inland to inland away from Tahakopi, because we were only 5 miles from the beach in those days, being at the sea and having bags of crayfish and bags of powers, bags of it. And my mum and dad would go and pull the net, flounders and sole. Oh my gosh, bags of it. And this was the day before deep freezes. But anyway, getting back to going to work, my life changed completely. And I was earning money and going out. I was introduced to alcohol. And but even though I was doing all these things like earning money and wearing high heel shoes, and I can remember my first LP I bought was Jim Reeves, Are You Lonesome Tonight? My first 45 record I bought was 10 Guitars, Knock on Your Door. All of that kind of stuff became a way of life for me. But I want to bring up something that is poignant at this time. During my childhood, I was sexually abused. It's not something I talk about easily, and here I am going public about it. Now, back then, I didn't recognize that. I was only a kid. I didn't recognize that. I didn't know to do anything about it. And one thing I do know now is that sexual abuse is invisible. Sexual abuse is not talked about. But here today, we do cover it. We do talk about it. And it is a conversation that is happening in the community. And when I think back to those days, it wasn't just me either. There were others amongst us that it happened to. So it's not until well into my adult life that I think back to those days and think, oh my God, that did happen. So if your mind goes frozen and you just push it somewhere else, that was me. While working at the Clinton refreshment rooms and earning money, At the age of 17, Dad's parents became unwell in Ua Tolaga Bay. And he sent me back to Ua Tolaga Bay to look after his parents. Well, again, that was another learning for me. Yes, my grandparents were not well. But the learning that happened for me, I was trusting to being what I am, a Māori wahine, or a Māori girl back in those days. And I became aware of things around me like karakia and church. My grandparents, they were, every Sunday you had to have Holy Communion. And the prihi would come to their home to give them their Holy Communion because they were not well people. And it took me back to my early childhood at the age of 3, 4, 5. I can remember the prihi coming to the house, and they were still coming to their home when I was at my age of 17. So it was a whole new learning for me, learning more about who I was. And then I returned back to Clinton. I think I might have been back in Ua for somewhere about 6, 7 months. And then I went back home, back down to Clinton, South Otago. And for a few months, I worked in a fish and chip shop in Balclutha. And then I went back to the refreshment rooms. And then, oh, well, here we go, 1970, I'm 21. But in 1969, I had my first child, Nathan Perami Henry. He was born on the 1st of the 2nd, 1969. Now, my parents brought him up, and he still lives in Clinton, in South Otago to this day, and is the caretaker of our family home that he was brought up in. And today he is 51. At the age of 22, I left Clinton to move and I left the refreshment rooms and I moved to Invercargill to work on the Southerner Express. Now that was a passenger train. It was an upmarket one too, that travelled between Christchurch and Invercargill back. And again, my life changed. I became back involved with hairdos and good money and drinking, all of those sort of things, and was certainly not living a life as a young Māori woman. I was a mother, but I can remember before I went to Invercargill, my father said about just a few words to me, "Waiho tō tama kei konei." And I knew, and back then, I never spoke Māori, but I knew what Dad was saying, leave my baby at home. And I did that. But while I was in Invercargill, again, I was aware of what was going on around me. I became aware of racism, and I would get into arguments and swear a lot. And it was not nice. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that people were like that. Anyway, I left Invercargill and I ended up in Wellington. Wow, my life took on a whole new meaning then. It was while I was in Wellington, I was 22, 23, I really became aware of what I was and who I was. I joined I went to Māori Mass first, and through doing that at the Kāinga, which was up behind St. Mary's of the Angels in the middle of Wellington. St. Mary's of the Angel is still there, but the Kāinga is long gone. And I joined this whānau who were all Māori Hāhi Katorika. And there I learned that's where I began to learn about the treaty. That's where I began to learn about how Hāhi Katorika came to be amongst my father's people in the far north. that's where I met somebody who absolutely blew my world, which was Pahinari Tate, and his kōrero way back then. And I also began to know another man who became our Māori Catholic, one and only Māori Catholic bishop for the Māori people of Aotearoa, Bishop Mariu. What a beautiful man. He was from Tokoroa. I learned all of that while I was in Wellington. But there I also learned about being different. I mean, I'd come across it in Nimbakaga, but being different. And I thought, what the heck? Again, I would get into arguments. Again, I would cause mayhem. I worked in a hotel in the Gresham in Lambton Quay. Well, that was lovely. What I got involved there, while I was there, was I was in Ngā Karere Kapahaka group, and we performed at the Huiarangas, and I was a cook. I had gone to Polytech to get my cooking certificate, so that I could do cooking in a hotel and in a hospital. But I learned that I was different because I met people who were kicking up about the wrong. And I knew people from Ngā Tamato back in the 70s. Tama Iti, I knew him. And I had seen him, John Tahupaira, who was one of the main tutors of our Kapahaka group. He was one of the most activists that I'd ever come across. And I began to realize, I thought, oh my God. Yeah, I really and truly took on board that I am Māori. And then I began to realize, oh, gee whiz. So you live in this society, you live thinking that everything's all right. But I always knew inside of me that there was something that wasn't quite right. And all of my life, I have gone about seeking that, which is my Māoridom. And I've never been one that's wanted to earn money and take on a mortgage, although I did when I got married. I've never been one that's wanted a lot of money in the bank, because I've always given my money out, and I still do that today, mostly to my children. I've never wanted a flash house. And it would have been nice, but what for? I've always been on the go. One thing I remember while I was in Wellington was Maturata, a man of his time. Didn't really know about him back then, and I would hear talk about him, and I would hear those that were in Ngā Tamato would talk about, oh, all Matu does is sit in Parliament and read Donald Duck comics. But when you look at his history, well, my gosh, he stands in his own mana. I know that he was very instrumental in the Treaty of Waitangi and putting it where it stands today. He worked so hard on that. I became aware of that. And then beside that, I also know that Maturata, let me think, I'm going to talk about Maturata, and I did some notes about him. Maturata, he was responsible for the establishment in 1997 for getting things moving for the Treaty of Waitangi. 1986, Matu was the principal claimant on the Muri Whenua Fishing Report, 1988. The work that man done. Those involved at that time, when it comes to the Treaty of Waitangi, were people like Koro Wetere, Bishop Paul Reeves, I remember him very well, who was the Governor General at that time. David Longy was the Prime Minister. I remember him very, very well in my time in Wellington. And what was said then, when I first heard it, people come and go, but the land endures. I learned that, and I thought about it, and I really thought about it a lot since, is that, you know, I have been exposed to so much more of anti-racism, colonization and oppression in our own whenua that those words, I'll never forget them. People come and go, but the land endures. How true. Although I have to say the land has been certainly put to the test at the moment with COVID-19 hitting the world. I wanted to mention something about David Longy. I worked in the Gresham Hotel on Lambton Quay, and David Longy was a lawyer then, and I would just walk, and when I wasn't working or finished work, I'd finish work, I would go across to the courthouse and listen to David Longy. And back then he was fighting for land rights and for the Treaty of Waitangi to be recognised. And I'm thinking, who's this big Pākehā man? What's he on about? But I have to say his work and his way of conducting the English language, I'd never heard it before. He was so eloquent, and he had all these books in front of him, and he could go to act, verse, whatever, in any pile of these big, thick books to talk about anti-racism, talk about the treaty, talk about what was happening during those times. And of course, when I think back to those times, gosh, I can now go to another important person back in that time too was Eddie Durie. He was a party, I think he was the chairman of the tribunal chairman way back in the 70s. And the talk back then was time to give strength to the treaty. Time to give strength to the treaty. Way back in all of those times. And what are we doing today, 2020? Still damn well trying to find strength for the treaty. Whawhai tonu mātou, as Professor John Ranginui Walker would say. Where can I go now? I want to talk about, oh yes, I played it. Oh, you're going to laugh at this one. I was in Wellington during the Land March. The whole lot of us at that time, us young Māoris, we wanted to be a part of that. I think I would have been about, I think it was 26. The Land March on the 13th of October, 1975. Well, we had talked about it and said, yes, we're going to go and join that. I specifically went to buy some Ugg boots. How stupid when I think back. Because I wanted to be comfortable walking. So I went and got these Ugg boots, put them on, caught the train all the way up to Purirua. A whole lot of us did, and I joined the march and walked from Purirua all the way to Parliament Steps. That time, the time of the great Whena Cooper. And as for the Ugg boots, well, they were a waste of time. I had to take them off and tied the strings and that, tied the laces and that to my waist. And I walked bare feet in black stockings, coming down the Kaparanga Gorge all the way into Wellington, around the wharf and everything, all the way to Parliament Steps. During that time, I became very, very aware of what was truly going on in our country. And it was just blowing my mind. I was thinking, I spent all my time safely tucked away in the bush, and all of this rubbish was going on, and it still is today. So do I know about colonisation? Do I know about anti-racism? Do I know about sexual abuse? Yes, I do.
Whaea, you have about 10 minutes.
Oh, tēnā koe, dear. Kia ora. I've just been told that I have 10 minutes left. I want to quickly cover that. One of the things that I done in my lifetime was started the Kohanga Reo in South Otago, in Clinton, in the redneck area, I want to say. That year was 1982, 1983. And then during that time, I had a son, Gerald, 1983, 1984. I had a daughter, Rawunya, 1985. I had a daughter, Rewa, In 1987, I had another daughter called Untitled Hera Pierce. Now, I want to talk about her. She was kohanga brought up, and she was a protege of my mother. During her time at Awhitia Kohanga, my mother was the kaiako. And my baby was my mother's protege. Anyway, at the age of 5, she left Kohanga and went to Clinton Primary School. That did not sit right with me. I didn't like it. And yes, even though she kept in touch with my mother, because back then I was not very good at my language. My mother was matatou, and we all looked to our mother. She was the head of our kohanga reo in Clinton, South Otago. But anyway, getting back to my baby. At the age of 10, I moved her lock, stock and barrel out of home in Clinton. And I boarded her with friends in Invercargill and put her into whare kura o aro whenua. And very proud of those times and of her. Even though I know that the trauma that she suffered by being put out of home, and in some ways still suffering today too, having to be put out of home, put away from us. My husband didn't agree with it. My children didn't agree with it. My family didn't agree with it. But I didn't listen. I was determined that she was my last. She was going to have what my mother had put into her. And so today she can speak Māori, and she does live Māori life to the best of her ability. But again, through circumstances, having to move her out of our home against the wishes of my family and husband of that time. She was a graduate of Arowhenua Kura Kaupapa in Invercargill, and those girls and boys that graduated at that time have gone on to do great things. So my baby is now Oranga Tamariki social worker and in Hamilton, and she really and truly works in the hard end of where our people sit in the sociological scrap heap in our own whenua. But that's another story. My muko Tiruki was born in 1999. Today, he's 20. He will be 21 in July. Very proud of him. He's in his 3rd year of university. As that boy learning about racism and colonisation, to me, he is the one that is going to make a difference. And going to live and make sure and carry out how the treaty should be. He wants to be a doctor too. I don't know if I mentioned that. 2002, we closed our Whaea Kohanga. The main worker, because I had moved to Invercargill to support my baby down there, and I stayed, and we lived together until she graduated from Te Whare Kura o Arowhenua. Closed a Whaea Kohanga 2002, and then 2007, before that, about 2004, I became involved in Hini Tūturu Kia Murihiku, rape crisis in Invercargill. And from there, I became involved in the task force for sexual abuse, 2007-2009, and have been a part of a founding member of Te Oahakia Hini National Network's Ending Sexual Abuse Together, and a founding member of Ngā Kaitiaki Māori. So I left Invercargill 2009, left my Tōmarangi whānau, left my Clinton whānau. See, I've always been on the move, and moved to Auckland. And it was while I was in Auckland that I went to Te Wānanga Aotearoa and gained my bachelor's degree in social work. Taina Pohatu, I will never forget him. What a beautiful man. And again, I took on board what I am, which is a Māori wahine within my own whānau, hapu and iwi. So, I don't know if there's anything else I could talk about. I could talk about, I was in Wellington at the time of when Rob Muldoon refused to stop the All Blacks coming to, no, not the All Blacks, Springboks coming to New Zealand. Oh yeah, well, that history is well written, and we all know. Prior to that, I know all about what Helen Clark, when she was in office, and I just want to say. There was a person, no, she's not a person, she is a wahine rongonui, Tariana Turia. She made a statement one time that what had happened, land colonization, what had they done to our people here in Aotearoa, was that it was a Holocaust. And Jenny Shipley, who was the leader of the National Party then, absolutely chastised her. What a cheek. But she did. She chastised Tariana and wanted Helen Clark to do something about it. Well, we all know what happened after that anyway. She started the Māori Party. And salutations for her for doing that. But anyway, that's my kōrero. Not sure where I should go now.
Thank you for that, Whaea.
Hea dear?
Yeah, thank you for that. We just have, would you like me to share the PowerPoint?
Yes, please, dear.
Okay.
Yeah, my beautiful kōrero, who's one of our staff, and is going to put up a PowerPoint. Okay. Now, everything that I have, here we are, colonisation. I've talked about that. I've talked about my name. Victorian Western ideology. I've talked about makeup, hairdos, high heel shoes. Dismantling of Māori values. Yes, I became aware of that. Even though within my own family, when it comes to kai, gathering kai and all of that, we knew how to do that. But out in the community, dismantling of Māori impositions of colonial law. Well, yes, I've covered that too. When I talk about Maturata, when I talk about Eddie Durie and all of them, who have long fought against the imposition of colonial law. Next one, dear. Religious views of wahine. I have covered that I am a hahi katorika, but I've always said that I'm Māori before I am a Catholic. And I've had arguments with people about that, because my whakapapa takes me back to the beginning of time. And when I think of Rome and St. Peter's and the popes and all of that, they're only just over 2,000 years old. So I stick to my argument. Disconnection from resources. I covered that when we left Hikurangi and moved to the Catlins, and leaving the resources of our family. Diminishing identity. Well, I think my whole family have suffered that through no fault of our own. And it's only in my adult life that I have gone after and been determined to find out who the hang I am. And structural racism, been around me all my life. Next one's there. Poverty, violence, intergenerational trauma, the lot. Okay, next one, dear. The treaty. Now, it's important to think about the treaty because there is another version. They talk about the treaty, T-R-E-A-D-Y. Don't look at that. There's no comparison. It is the treaty. Te whakaputanga. Well, when I look at te whakaputanga, I think of people like Ani Mikaere. I think of people like Annette Sykes, who took on the New Zealand law and justice to talk about and made their stamp when they made sure that they knew about the treaty. And of course, the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Rights. Totally support that. Acknowledging trauma. I've done that in my kōrero. Next one, dear. Addressing trauma. Through my work and being a practitioner in the field of sexual abuse, and within my there is sexual abuse in my family. It's in my hapu, and all I can say there is that a lot of it remains invisible, which is wrong, but it's a fact. Restoring and rebuilding will always do that, and I covered that in my kōrero too. Next one, dear. Mātauranga informed practices. I love this here. It is here in looking at our frameworks, who we are, our values, our tikanga, it's the only way to go. So levelling the playing field for us in Ngā Kaitiaki Māori, Te o Hākia Hine National Networks Ending Sexual Abuse, that is exactly what we're doing. We have members that are a part of the joint venture, a business program with MSD, and we've been involved in many, many working groups, and since 2007 we set about to do nothing but level the playing field. Mobilising local response, we do that too. We have workers that work up in Taitokiro all the way down, right across the country, who work hard in mobilising local response. Critical projects, at the moment, Ngā Kaitiaki Māori are very involved in some very critical projects, as are whānau hapu and iwi across the Mututu. And one project that I was very involved in was the Matatini last year when we held a table at Wellington. And Toyota, wow, that's the dream. That's what we want. And by honouring the treaty and really and truly bringing out into the open the racism that's it. One thing good about Toyota is that 1921, the education system is going to talk about the land wars. I'm a granddaughter of the land wars. My mother was a daughter. Her mother was actually amongst it. So when we look at Toyota, there's years and years and years of restoring of violations that have been done to us through implementing their pragmatic, dogmatic way upon us. And of course, everything is all about kua ea te o hake ahene. What NKM and what we as a people are thriving for, total elimination of sexual abuse. And that is my life work. That is what I want. I want it for my mokopuna, and I want it for ngā whānau hapu yet to be born. I'm going to finish by just singing this little wee hymn. It was written by my mother.
One second, Fa, there's a few questions coming through. Would you like to answer them before your hymn?
Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay. So, Fa, one of the question is, you talk about all these heroes and change makers in your life. Would you ever consider yourself a hero?
I consider myself that whittles from the side. You know, I can't shut my mouth up. Put me in an environment and I will speak out. But when I talk about these other people who have played a pivotal role in my life, I think about my koka, my auntie, Hini Phillips. She lived for years in Christchurch, played a huge part in my journey in Kohangarau and in my own journey. And the reason why I wear a muku kauai, you know, so, yeah. No, I don't think of myself like that. I just think I'm just Hera.
And
if you know, you don't give yourself mana, that comes from wherever it comes from, but it doesn't come from me.
Okay. Whaea, another question we have is, what is the most important thing in levelling the playing field?
Acceptance, equality, equalism. What's good for Māori, what's good for whānau hapu iwi is good for the whole world. It's good for this country. Yes, honour the treaty. And look at the anti-racism, you know. The education. I have a daughter who's an educationalist, and she's all about levelling the playing field in everything that she does. Her name is Tiwi Ngarodan. She's 42 years old, and she's an educationalist and worked for the Minister of Education, and has really stamped her mark here in Auckland in the field of education. And I'm very proud of her because she really and truly fights for levelling the playing field.
Okay, so we just have 5 minutes left, so we have 3 more questions.
Yep.
What is the answer to intergenerational trauma?
For me, as a practitioner in the field of sexual abuse, I believe it has to start from inside of the womb. Now, there was a time, and all of our whakapapa proves it so, where we were revered. Women were revered. Men would kill for 2 things, land and woman. And we were revered because we were the carriers of life. So to me, I really and truly believe there are some fantastic things, great things happening around the world, around the country, amongst our people. For me as a practitioner, I believe the answer lies within inside of our womb, because that gift that is within us is not talked about, and it's not something that's again, it's something that's invisible. Te ira tāne, te ira wahine, there lies the answer. Yep,
Okay,
yep.
and another question we have is, what do you recommend for healing trauma?
Wānanga. Whānau. Whānau have the answers. They're within your own whānau. For a lot of whānau, we have been pushed so far away from who we are as a people. Our statistic of where our men sit in jail is a big example. But the answer is within whānau. And it's not easy, and it's not pretty, and it's not nice, but it's necessary. Really and truly necessary.
Okay, and another question we have is, if sexual violence occurred prior to colonisation, how was it dealt with / resolved?
Oh, sweetheart. Simply and quickly. My research tells me that utu was one of our main laws. So if you were in utu, if you put yourself into utu, then that means that the utu holds many facets. Utu talks about you have committed the wrong. So you will go through the process of utu. And in days of old, and it happened in the 18th century, you paid with your life. It depends. The decision usually rests with the hapu and the iwi, and or you were ostracized out of your whānau, out of your iwi. You were ostracized off your marae. Way back in the old days, the research tells me that you became a slave to whoever hapu you had transgressed the violence to. Yes, it was dealt with swiftly, whereas today we just go to jail and just go to court and serve your time and think you've done it all. Well, suicide and the wrongs that our men and our women are suffering today is a huge reason that of colonization and anti-racism, and doesn't even look at tino rangatiratanga.
Thank you for that very much, Whaea. We have a lot of appreciation pouring in for you from the webinar chat. Many people are saying, such an honour and a privilege. Kia ora, you are an inspiration, so much aroha. You deserve that respect and aroha in return. Levelling the playing field is exactly what it is about. So there's a lot of appreciation for you, Whaea, and the amazing kōrero that you've done today.
Tēnā koe, dear.
And just for our participants who have watched this webinar, so after this, if you want to head on over to our Facebook page, Te o Hakia Ahene, we have compiled a list of resources for people to go and have a look at, and you'll be able to learn more about Māori and colonisation and sexual violence. So over to you now, Whaea.
Tēnā koe, dear. Okay, well, I'm just going to finish off with this himene. Ko tuku whaia, tuku whai ipo, tuku kōka, tuku mama e tui ana tēnei. E wangi nui o te rārau taima tō roka mai o te kohanga reo. Ko tēnei te himene. Whakarongo mahera te matua, ko koe te matua, o nā iwi kato, Ho mai kia mātou, nā kupu o te whakapono, te huarahi tika. Te huarahi tika. Te tino rangatiratanga. Te tino rangatiratanga. Amenei. Kia ora koutou katoa.